Hello everybody. So, today I'm going to be playing this because of things going on, but if you guys don't know, this is a response to Mega Capital G's latest video. Sorry if the mic quality sucks, because for some reason my mic does not like to pick up sounds correctly and makes it into a fucking mess. Sorry about the swearing as well. But today I'll be talking about his latest video, which was actually released about less than an hour ago, and that was pendulums. Now, if you guys don't know how pendulum works, I'll explain it in my next video. But in a simple sense, pendulum is a summoning method that allows you to summon monsters from your hand and or extra deck, who, mind you, from the extra deck they must be pendulum monsters, whose levels are in between the two numbers on the scale. So in this case, 2 and 7 means you can summon between 3 and 6 from your hand or from your extra deck. Now, he came up with a video recently called, Konami is officially abandoning Pendulum. And I wish to make a response to that because he does make a few comments in there that I think are, I wouldn't say they were wrong or mean-spirited, but I think that they're not right under a technicality. Because overall, the big issue with Pendulum was not that people don't like it. I know in his video he specifically states that there's not a big fan base for it, as in that there's not a very big fan base. There's not many people like it, stuff like that. The issue with that comment is that you guys can just look at a lot of the videos together, and I mean, like, it's so weird to say this, but there is a much bigger pendulum liking group than you think, Capgy. And I'm not trying to say that, you're stupid or if you don't know what you're talking about. I'm just saying, from looking at what I can see, there is still a good chunk of people that defend Pendulum. And why is that, you say? Well, because frankly, people say Pendulum is overpowered, or oh, it's a stupid mechanic. The mechanic itself, I'll say this. He was right that yes, they did have to change the mechanic. Yes, they did have to do a lot with the mechanic, which was two major changes. One, making it so they take up Spell and Trap Zone instead of their own special zone. And that they also can only summon from the extra deck to either a zone a link monster points to, or to an extra monster zone if they're in the extra deck when they were summoned. Now, at the time of their release, and I actually make a detailed comment on his video explaining this, Pendulum, at least during its era, so Arc V era, was overpowered. I can admit that completely. And that is simply because of the fact that being able to special summon 5 from the extra deck is extremely overpowered. I actually played Pendulum, specifically Perform a Pal Odd Eyes, at the end of Master Rule 3, and that was when I actually started getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh! For the first time since, let me think, 2006? Not even, more like 2000. It was around 2008, actually, if I'm remembering correctly. So, what do I think is his issue with Pendulum? I don't know, because frankly, he says the Pendulum enables a lot of generic stuff, and a lot of people in the comments say their issues you can special summon from your hand a bunch of cards and stuff like that. You can dump your whole hand out. I can prove to you right now why that's such a stupid thing. And that's simply, look at this deck, right? This deck is a piece of trash deck. But this deck, right here, if opening anywhere of a semi-decent hand, can not only open up with multiple cards on the field, but it can also go into Link 4s, Link 2s, and Link 3s insanely fast while still having disruption on the field, such as World Legacy's Mind Meld, and all that. And if you look at this deck, well, simply put, World Legacy in Shadow, a Harp Horror, any two Crusadia monsters, and a Crawler, and that's if you draw them in one turn, like I said, is either a Link 4, specifically probably Orchestrion, maybe, and even, or just a bunch of Link monsters on the field. That gives me more card advantage. So, I mean, you're saying that like, a lot of people say the issue is you can just dump monsters from your hand. The issue is, though, is that it's all one summon as well, so any card, like, frickin', you know, Bottomless Trap Hole and stuff like that, can easily just obliterate the deck before it comes in. As for a deck like this, you are special summoning all your monsters from your hand, but all in different, all in different time. So, or even monsters from your graveyard deck, stuff like that. And basically, you can do what Pendulum does effectively with this deck, if you open up right, whilst leaving yourself less open for disruption. Unlike Pendulum. So, you complain and say Pendulum is that you very much dislike Pendulum. I don't agree with your opinion, but I think you are entitled to your opinion. But for those saying Pendulum is broken, it is really not. Because overall, Pendulum, and even the best Pendulum archetypes, Pendulum Magician, Endymion, friggin' Zephyra, so on and so forth, all of them, the only reasons they become viable, except for Pendulum Magicians was a different story, and maybe Pepe, but Pepe is more because Master Rule 3 existed, and a few cards were left in that probably shouldn't have been allowed in the game. But either way, Pendulum Magicians is probably the only archetype in itself, like, that if you were to play close to pure, functions very well as a Pendulum deck on its own. The issue with Zephyra is the fact that Zephyra just has only has a few really good cards in it, and mainly the fact is that the thing that makes Zephyra great is the fact that it can keep searching what it needs and then summoning monsters and then going into their combos. So basically, they require outside support, but the thing is that they can search any of the cards they need fast enough to where, and they have the right levels to make themselves viable. As for Pendulum Magicians, well, Pendulum Magicians, oh, you destroy them, they get extra effects. Oh, they try and summon and you negate it somehow. You can summon one of them back, you can pop cards on the field, you can frickin', well, White Wing Magician doesn't count because White Wing Magician sucks. But you have cards that can add ones back from your extra deck to your hand, which is a mechanic which is really good because that circumvents some of the old Pendulum mechanics, the Master Rule 4 Pendulum mechanics, so on and so forth. So, when you look at it, Pendulum Magician is the only deck that runs Pendulum right now that actually has the ability to stand on its own really well. I mean, you have Endymion, but the issue with Endymion is the fact that you simply put... There's only really 3 cards in the deck that are actually useful. At least from the Endymion themselves, like 3 good Endymion cards. And that is Spell Power Mastery, which allows you to add one and then place spell counters on the field. You have Servant, which special summons your Endymion from the deck and puts itself on the field. And then you have Endymion, which is a negate. That's about it. Now there are some generic Pendulum cards that are good, such as Mythical Beast Jackal King. Well, that's not the right name of the card, but It's the mythical beast, Pendulum Jackal. But point still being, though, is the fact that Pendulum, outside of generic card support, is not very strong by itself. Now, I know Triff would like to beg to differ, but Triff is also a combo deck player, so let's throw that out the window right now. I'm talking about just standard. If you were using only Pendulum monsters, the Pendulum decks are terrible. Now, why am I making this video? Well, simply because I don't think Konami should throw Pendulum under the window. There are plenty of fair Pendulum decks out there. Do you want to hear what they are? Okay, let's see. Metal Foes, after they got their thing, like after the Master of 4 nerf, nowhere near as insufferable, but they still work well because they can keep getting their resources back after fusion summoning. So, makes them fair, because they can still do their standard plays, but they can't just summon 5 from the extra deck, which is good. You have Abyss Actors. Good beatdown deck, punishes your opponent for running mass spell, like mass spell and trap removal, or just, just randomly firing, like a blind firing your cards, similar to artifacts, and they're just overall a fun beatdown type strategy. You have Magispectors, which, outside of Kieran, which Kieran was kind of broken, we can all admit that, the deck is literally just a control deck that uses Pendulum to give it a few extra resources. Like I said, then the Master of 4s, now that Master of 4 has happened, and subsequently Master of 5, the deck only gets 1 to 2 summons from the extra deck, aside from if you're running other combo cards. And then you finally have my favorite one, which is, well, I guess my two favorite ones, which are Performapal and subsequently Draco Slayers. So, Draco, or how I say, you call it, Draco Pals. Deck can still make decent plays, that can still do some good, but it's not overpowered. The deck easily dies to certain disruptions, and overall, the biggest thing that Performapal or Draco Pals in general have is the fact that they can spam a few specific monsters at the extra deck that are fairly good, and the fact that they also can draw a bunch of cards off of the Turtle/Lizard Draw combo. If you look at all these decks, most of them lose a lot to their other counterparts within it. Fusion summoning, they would, before the banning of the new Thunder Dragon, before the banning of, Thunder Dragon Colossus and all that, they generally lost. Most fusion decks like that, or especially Metal Foes, could lose to simply Thunder Dragons because they'd have way too many negates for their fusions. So they would, for their fusion monsters and their fusion cards. You have the fact that you have pretty much any deck going against Spiral. Pendulum has a okay matchup against Spiral, depending on how you open. But basically, if you go second against Spiral's Pendulum, you're dead. Because, simply put, they can just destroy your skills, can't play. Eldritch. No monster effects. You probably won't get your skills off properly. Like I said, you got 2 spell and trap negates, so that negates at least 2 of your skills, which is about half your hand. Then you have the fact that they just negate everything else. Seem fair to you? Yeah. Exactly. Now, and with the banning of heavy metal foes, electromite, and stuff like that, and like I said, there are still good Pendulum decks out there. But, point being is, from what I've showed you, Pendulum itself is not, the mechanic itself is not an issue anymore. It's merely that there are certain cards out there that should not be brought back. And that there should be new archetypes revolving around the Pendulum mechanic that are closer in line to Abyss Actors and stuff like that. but that aren't overpowered. So like that are closer in line to Abyss actors and stuff like that, like, you know, where they're fun decks, like, you know, they're not completely broken, but also not as limited as Abyss actor, because Abyss actor, you can't special summon monsters other than Abyss actor monsters, which kind of sucks. So I mean, make like a deck that does allow you to special summon from the extra deck, but isn't too overpowered in its mechanic. And that's simply all you really need to do. I mean, and I've even looked at this because I've been on my alt account for this game. I've actually been playing with cards like Astrograph Sorcerer and stuff like that. And you can have Astrograph Sorcerer and Double Iris Magician come back. And the sad thing is it doesn't really break it. It simply doesn't break the game. Simply put, the fact being is the fact that, well, okay, you send another card to your extra deck based on the monster that's destroyed on the field. Literally, all you get is a body on the field and an extra card in the extra deck, which you can only summon one of unless you got a Link monster. And even then, the best that sets up for is a Synchro or Xyz play. Because guess what? The only real fusion card that most Pendulum players play, you can't play. Why? Because it's banned. And for, frankly, a little bit of a good reason. Supreme King Starving Venom, you deserve to stay banned. But overall, like I said, even like Double Iris Magician, the trap isn't good. The spell's okay, but you can easily destroy the spell. The trap, like I said, not very good, although I have seen people run it and it can be run. It's not terrible, but it's just not, I don't know. Without Double Iris Magician, it's too slow to run. But overall, guys, that's my kind of argument about Pendulum. I know my comment is probably going to sound a lot more interesting than my actual clip, should I say. But overall, like I said, I don't think Pendulum, as the mechanic is right now, is a problem. It is simply the fact that there are so many generic graveyard cards that work with Pendulum, as well as the fact that there are so many like boss monsters and other things that Pendulum can use that cause their issues, much less than the mechanic itself, because the mechanic itself is actually extremely bad, considering the fact that, you know, a deck simply like Rocket, or should I say Dragon Link more or less, can easily combo out not only more, depending on, maybe Zephyr might be able to match it closely, but not only that, but can also work through more negates than Pendulum now, just because the fact that either A, the mechanic simply just doesn't allow them to special summon enough monsters, and B, if you disrupt them at the right time, like any good player should, the entire deck falls apart. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Like I said, should be making a Pendulum guide actually soon enough, hopefully. I might even use this deck, this like structure deck, sadly, because I don't have the card shop unlocked. Oh, I do have Gong Strong, but still, I don't have all the cards I need to make an actual Pendulum deck. So, like I said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I think the whole situation is kind of stupid, because I don't think Konami should just sweep this archetype or the summoning type under the rug. It's actually a, at this point, fairly balanced archetype, or balanced summoning mechanic. And I think it does deserve a chance to have new support for it. And no, I'm not counting Toon Chaos. If anyone knows about the Toon Chaos things, they are all OCG cards that were imported. They are not new cards. They are just cards that were brought over. Either way, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Like I said, I might make more responses to Capital G in the future, because this actually seemed kind of interesting to me, and it looks like I've gotten actually a lot of support or a bit more support than usual from the comment section. But that being said, this is Desmond Yu-Gi-Oh! / Desmond2530 signing off.